All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming out to a bookstore on a rainy day. Boy, it feels like 2018, right? Pre-COVID, we're all out here in a bookstore. Thank you so much for coming out. My name's Cheryl Bronstein. I'm one of the event coordinators here at Book Passage. So happy to welcome you into a store. And we have a lot of authors and writers with us today, so that's equally exciting. So welcome back to all our family and friends, local authors, guests. Welcome to Holding On to Air. Um, we are very, very proud to bring you all this programming that we have here at Book Passage. We do probably close to 900 events a year. Yeah, you heard that right. That number is significant. And many of these programs are free. I mean, there's no cost. You can just come out and be entertained and learn something. And again, it's all free. It's at Book Passage. We want you to look at our calendar on our website, bookpassage.com, because we have incredible people coming. I'm going to just mention a few. We have an event with the famous RuPaul at the Curran Theater on March 14th at 7:30. He has a new memoir out called House of Hidden Meanings. It's going to be an incredible event. He's got a lot of people that he's going to be talking to. He is such a force. So again, that's March 14th. And then on February 24th, here in our Corte Madera store at 4 p.m., we'll be hosting the New York Times bestselling author A.J. Finn. And he is the author of The Woman in the Window. And his new book is called End of Story. And I know it's getting really good reviews. People love it. And again, he will be here in our store on February 24th at 4 p.m. here in Corte Madera. So again, check out our calendar, bookpassage.com. We have a lot going on. We've got classes, we've got virtual events, as well as the in-person events. Such a great community here. Our mission is to enrich, engage, and inspire. And as many of you know, Book Passage has been a Bay Area institution and a family-owned business for over 40 years. And we are so proud of that. And we thank all of our wonderful, loyal customers because we want to be around to serve you for another 40 years. Well, before I introduce today's participants, I just want to express how proud we are at Book Passage to be able to showcase and promote important work and authors like Michele DeMarco. Presenting books that can improve people's lives, especially when they are at their lowest point, is a platform that I think is vital for an independent bookstore and something that we represent and that we're very proud of. That is what an independent bookstore should be and is all about. And I thank you all for coming out and sharing this vision. After experiencing 2 rare heart attacks at the age of 33 and a third one a decade later, DeMarco knows trauma intimately. Trauma breaks your relationship with time by upending your expectations, fracturing your memories and identity, and destroying your innocence. Holding On to Air is a guide to what comes after survival. Readers can benefit from her wisdom as a practical approach to discovering the power of resilience and the hope that we can all achieve in the face of adversity. Michele DeMarco, PhD, is an award-winning writer and published author in the fields of psychology, trauma, health, and spirituality, and is a professionally trained therapist and researcher specializing in injury and resilience. She is one of the medium's top writers in health and mental health. She studied marriage and family therapy at Antioch University. She completed her PhD in psychology at the California Institute of Integral Studies, where she is also the Executive Director of Communications, Marketing, and Strategic Relations, and she teaches creative nonfiction writing and conflict transformation. Quite a very busy and diverse person. Michele is joined today by Kimberley Cameron. Now, Kimberley is a very dear friend of Book Passage. We are very fortunate to see her regularly in our store. She has been a very successful agent for over 30 years. She enjoys mentoring and fostering the careers of her clients. While working largely by referral, she is always looking for the exceptional writing in any field, particularly writing that touches the heart and makes us feel something, just like today's book. She represents both fiction and nonfiction manuscripts. Kimberley is currently a member of the AALA and the Authors Guild, and she lives here locally in Marin County. And as I said, we are very fortunate that she comes into the store regularly and gives us all of her information and advice. We always welcome her. So we are thrilled today to honor these two powerhouse people in their fields. They are incredible writers. They in the world of publishing. So without further ado, let's give a very warm welcome to Michele DeMarco and Kimberley Cameron.
Thank you all for coming. I think this is on. Can you hear me? Okay. Really out in the rain, especially. I really appreciate that. I want to give a special shout out to our friend Erin Byrne, who just flew in from Paris to be here. Erin is the one who, thank you. Erin is the one who introduced me to the fabulous Dr. Michele DeMarco. And she was a client of mine a couple of years ago. We tried to sell her fiction book, which I thought was very good, but I was unsuccessful. But anyway, when she sent me her nonfiction proposal, I knew immediately that number one, I wanted to read the book. And number two, I wanted to represent this very important and poignant and kind of a book that shares a universal truth that everyone can benefit from. So I hope it touches the lives of many, many, many readers. And I'm here today to interview her with some questions. And she's going to read a little bit from the book so that you get a little bit about what the book is about. So, do you have anything to say before I start? It's on.
Oh, I may have a few things, just
Okay.
a couple.
Okay.
First of all, my deepest gratitude to you. And I'm just letting you all know I may not make it through this without shedding a few tears here, but this has been such a wonderful, wonderful ride with you. And it would not be here without you and all of our lunches and all of our deep conversations. And you're just a treasure. And I thank you so much.
Thank you, darling.
And to my parents, who are here and who I quite literally would not be here without, in in every possible way. I love you to the stars and back, and thank you so much for making me who I am today. And to all of my friends who flew in here, Erin Byrne flew in from France. Rhonda, my colleague and dear friend, flew in from Florida. My soul sister Rebecca flew in from Boston. We've got a lot of folks here, and just to all of you, familiar faces some, and to new faces. Thank you just so much for coming, and I hope this is helpful.
And thank you to all my friends who are here as my support group. I always appreciate your presence at these things. We had a very nice turnout today, so thank you. Michele, I saw in the Marin magazine that you wrote something about this book that I wanted to share. If anybody didn't get to see that article that we're in together in it. You talk about the book, you say, holding on to air is a trusted guide for the essential journey of reclaiming your life in the face of lost innocence and building a resilient spirit. And I couldn't say it any better. That's exactly what this book is. And as I said, I hope it touches the lives of so many. So the big first question I'm going to ask you is, tell us why you wrote this book.
Good to start with the basics. Honestly, ultimately, I wrote it because I wanted to help people deal with some of the most difficult times of their lives. And I've had quite a few, and know that feeling myself. Um, I can say that I think the big questions of life, the big existential questions, that's something that I've been interested in probably from the time I was young. And I'll tell you a small story that my parents can validate here, which was when I was young, breaking news would come on this on the television, and it would send, because I just assumed like the world was collapsing, and I literally like had a Harry Potter like bunker underneath the stairs where I had, and I'm not joking, like a sleeping bag, peanuts, a flashlight, and I literally hid under there for hours. They can verify this. And I was thinking about these big issues and how people deal with them even at a young age. And I think that always stuck with me. And when it came time to go to school, and I wanted to go a little deeper, so I studied world religion and ethics, comparative culture and conflict, and psychology. Basically, anything that touched the human condition, I wanted to know about. And on the heels of coming out of some graduate programs, and starting to conceive this book. Originally, it was conceived as just a little handbook for grief and loss. There's a framework that we can talk about a little later, but and that I had started conceiving that when I was in graduate school, and then lo and behold, I wake up 2008 feeling like an elephant stood on my chest, and that was the beginning of a major loss of innocence for me. So it's been quite a journey from there till here, and that's how this book came to be.
And we thank you for writing it
Oh.
because it's a very important and treasure. It's a treasure, is what I think of it. So, loss of innocence is just a wonderful phrase, full of meaning, and it's a unique way of looking at meaningful adversity, which is also a really great way of thinking about things. Meaningful adversity, not just bad stuff happens. It's like meaningful bad stuff happens to us. What sparked this thought, and why do you feel seeing through this lens is so important or relevant?
Well, I think the concept of lost innocence is something that is both timely and timeless. And it's one of those concepts that you feel like it just you know it when you feel it, and you can feel it kind of going away from you. I'm going to read just a little excerpt from the book that kind of goes in, that will give you a sense of probably one of the first times I realized a loss of innocence, except for when I was hunkering down in the closet. Um, and then maybe I can come back and expand on that a little bit. So I'm going to head over here. Definitely need the glasses. Okay. Be helpful if I had the right page. Okay. So this is from chapter 2, called Letting Go of Innocent Assumptions. I remember in no particular order. 1. Sitting cross-legged on the red shag carpet in my bedroom, holding a strawberry shortcake figurine on the top floor of my dollhouse. My mother appeared in the doorway to give me the news that we were going to visit my beloved grandmother in Pennsylvania. We are? I squealed, my heart soaring. Yes, she said. And we're going to take an airplane. 2. Standing at a bright wall of glass, me perched on my mom's hips, her pointing to the sky as a jet the size of a dinosaur soared up and disappeared into the clouds. Then a moment later, another dinosaur wiggled closely above the tarmac, then dropped onto the runway with a thud and a roar. See, my mom said, giving me a big hug. Airplanes go up and they come down. There's nothing to be scared of. 3. Sitting squashed in the window of a seat of a Boeing 737 beside a man with forearms the size of my head. I was on the way to Disney World to meet my mom for a girls' weekend in anticipation of my high school graduation. She was already in the Magic Kingdom for a professional conference. It was the first time in my life I was absent a flying companion. Airplanes go up and they come down, I repeated, as the jet rolled backward and began to pivot. There's nothing to be afraid of. 4. Being 36,000 feet above the ground, with the sun streaming in my Walkman blasting music through my headset, watching out the window as clouds danced around the plane. How could anything this beautiful be scary? I thought to myself, relaxing into the seat with a sense of wonder and calm blanketing me. 5. Opening the front door and hearing the phone ringing a decade later, saying hello, then handing the receiver to my then husband Bill when a faceless voice asked to speak with him. Hearing my ex say, "Hey man, how do you," then watching as his 6'2" frame fell slowly toward the floor. Then hastily throwing a nearby kitchen chair beneath him as he held the phone away from his ear and said with robotic effect after he hit the cushion, "He's telling me my brother was on the Alaska Airlines flight that crashed into the Pacific Ocean today off the coast of Los Angeles." 6. Sitting in an anodyne hotel ballroom at one of 30 or 40 haphazardly placed tables surrounded by my ex-husband's grieving family, with 87 other distraught families in close proximity. In the distance, at the front of the room, a man in a navy fleece jacket with white hair stood at the podium, speaking carefully into a staticky microphone about the need for family DNA samples for identification purposes, and forthcoming from National Transportation, the NTSB board officials, who could answer questions about aerodynamics and the impact of the crash on the human body. Planes really do fall out of the sky, I thought blankly. So I included that passage. Oops. There we go. I included that passage because it was one of the first times in my life I actually realized that bad things can happen to good people, and that things that you thought you depended on in life actually do happen and can happen, and sometimes when you least expect it. And as I sat there in that ballroom, I just remember thinking, I don't feel like the same person anymore. This is different, and that didn't even happen directly to me, but the notion that this kind of thing can happen, and it puts the fear of God into you. I mean, it really does, and just how you orient in life changes, and so that was also part of the impetus for going to school and studying what I studied. So, when I was going through the heart attacks and everything else, which we can talk about a little bit, but I really noticed that when you lose something, if you lose your glasses or your wallet, you lose a little face, you might lose some money because of what you spent on them. But when you lose something meaningful, like a person, a relationship, a pet, your faith, your confidence, your hope, your job, your security, your safety, all these, something that's meaningful. Not only do you lose the thing itself, but you lose a part of yourself and your innocence, a part of your innocence. And that does a number to your identity, how you think about yourself, how you think of others and the world. And it kind of makes you feel like a stranger in a strange land where everything looks the same and somehow everything's changed at the same time. So I think that point of the dual nature of loss is what was really important, because I haven't heard it phrased that way, and I've searched the bookshelves for how people are addressing meaningful loss. And for me, it's just that this is a concept that is inherent to the human condition. It's something we all know. And frankly, none of us get out of this life without experiencing it at some level, and maybe multiple times.
And several times in the book, I just stopped and when I was reading the proposal and felt, oh my God, there were little instances in this book that just freed me, that I was grieving over a lost relationship or something. And she wrote something in this book that I just want to share. And she said, some things are just sad. And all of a sudden, I felt this burden lift because I couldn't fix this relationship. It's, with a relative. And I just couldn't fix it. And instead of grieving it, I felt like some things just can't be fixed. And I felt this wonderful freedom from that. So you really helped me personally with this book. So of course I had to represent it and sell it.
Wrote it for you, Kimberly.
Thank you, darling. What was the hardest part about writing this book, given its personal nature?
I guess for me, writing about personal stuff is actually fairly therapeutic. One of the areas of research is in healing writing, and so that has always come kind of naturally to me. I think the hardest part about writing this book was actually, frankly, going through the framework and going through it myself. At the same time, I was I was writing it and saying, Jesus, Michele, really? Really? Are you going to really do this to me? Like, I wanted to hit myself on a few occasions because it was like, what are you asking me to do? No, no. And I'm like, damn, yes, okay. I have to. So it was thinking it through. It was living it. But part of the reason why I wanted to so the book is both, it has some memoir in it, but it also has, a framework and how people can work through it. I've read so many books that are written by detached clinicians, or they cite, Fred says, and from a client or something like that. And I really wanted, if I wanted to trust, if I wanted the readers, all of you, to trust me that what I'm saying actually may have some help, maybe of benefit, I was going to do this myself. And so it shows not only my successes, but a couple of the less than successes, to show that this is work, and it's good work, and it's healing work. But you do get through it.
Well, it's
Stronger.
very honest, and in its honesty, I think it's profound, and it's truthful. So that's what attracted me to it as well. Okay, you talk about how relationships often change after the loss of innocence. That resonated with me, as I told you, and others have experienced this as well. So can you speak about that?
Yes. So and this is super important. When the rug gets pulled out from underneath your life and you go crashing down because of meaningful adversity, loss of innocence, and you're struggling to get back up, and you're looking around, and the world, kind of like we were saying, no longer make sense, and people are looking to you, and they think you look the same, but they don't realize that something inside has changed. So often relationships shift and change as a result of this. You don't know how some of the things that you used to think were important may not be important anymore. Some of the friendships, relationships that maybe you could count on, you realize maybe you can't. Some new some new relationships come in that you're surprised by, and in a good way. So, you know, one of the things, and I might do a little reading on this one too. Yeah, let me do, because there's two parts, because this was kind of the downer part, and we have an upper part coming. So let me, oops, and I'm gonna go falling down because of these heels. Okay, give me one sec. Okay, this is called Captives in a Strange New World. Tradition reminds us that the loss of innocence is like a rite of passage, an initiation of sorts that's the foundation of mature flourishing. But in the moment, it usually doesn't feel that way. When adversity happens and steals a part of our innocence, we often find ourselves captives in a strange new world, where the familiar all looks the same, but somehow the way we feel about the familiar and our relationship to it is suddenly different. It's as if we're alienated from our normal world. Everyone and everything else going about life as usual, but for us, normal is no more. Although the disorientation can take a toll on us individually, it can also profoundly affect our relationships. Although friends and loved ones can be sympathetic to our pain and concerned for our well-being, they can't always understand, though we may look our usual selves, something meaningful has changed within us. Sometimes it's us who no longer knows how to interact with them. Other times it's them who doesn't know how to approach us. Often it's both. I remember in the weeks after my heart attacks, I noticed all too obviously that the flurry of cards, flowers, and other token well wishes had come to a halt, and that the phone had stopped ringing. And when I'd talk to people, they'd often ask rather reluctantly, how are you? Then they'd nod and make sympathetic faces and sounds that under other circumstances would be expected and appropriate when I started to fill them in on what happened. But their blank stares or no stares, because they were too busy looking at the ground or looking at the horizon, or frankly anywhere other than at me, left me thinking, thanks, but you really have no idea what I'm talking about, do you? It was as if I had immigrated to a new world, never to see the old country again. And so, at the same time, love and connection. So I have in the book, there's 7 pillars of resilience. One of them is love and connection. Because during times of meaningful loss, you really need love and you really need connection. So you're kind of in this tough place where the world no longer makes sense and your relationships are kind of up and down, but you still need that really, really badly. So I'm going to read another part, because what's important to do is reach out to trusted others, and trusted is key there. So I had this marked. Okay. I'm sorry, give me 1 second. This is why 61 is not 67, Michelle. That's where the glasses come in. Okay. Okay. Oh my. Oh, and I'm sorry. I'm reading the wrong one.
Well, it's all good.
We have no place else to be.
Take your time.
Did I mention there's wine back there? Okay, I got it now. Timing is everything. Okay. Pillar 3, love and connectedness. From the moment of our birth, and in many ways before, we're connected. To our biological parents through DNA, to our mother because we shared and are nourished for her by her body for a time, to our families because they're our primary relationships throughout our lives, to society and culture that guide us collectively in how to act, how to dress, what's acceptable to say, what to believe, what rituals to follow, to the human race through similar genetic characteristics and qualities, to the environment and to our surroundings in which we live. And no matter what our effort, we stay connected in one way or another throughout the rest of our lives. Being connected is one of the realities of life. In fact, recent neuroscience research shows that we're hardwired for it. When we talk to other people, mirror neurons in our brains light up to mimic the emotions and behaviors of the other person that the other person is conveying. Matthew Lieberman, director of UCLA's Social Cognitive Neuroscience Lab, suggested that human beings' need for connection is even more basic than food and shelter, and is the primary motivation of a person's behavior. So the desire to bond and belong is real. And because love, that generative felt sense deep inside that ties and binds us emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually to another person, is the strongest and healthiest form of human bonding and belonging. It stands to reason then that love is an essential ingredient for resilience. Love opens our hearts and lifts our spirit. It allows us to feel both vulnerable and strong. It builds trust and helps us to expand our comfort zones. It makes us come alive and encourages us to make meaningful commitments. Love strengthens our confidence and builds our sense of worth. Love gives us a sense of true and enduring peace. So often in the face of lost innocence, all we want to do is retreat from everything and everyone. Of course, taking time on our own to process what has happened is not only helpful but essential, although it's not a primary strategy. It's when we become an isolated island that bad things happen. Reaching out and letting trusted others in is an absolute must when it comes to building a resilient spirit. And note here the word trust. It's key. Sharing struggles, difficult emotions, uncertainty, and so on can make us feel vulnerable. Now is not the time to test the waters with those who can't be counted on, to listen, to be present, to hear, to have empathy, to show compassion, to offer benevolent honesty, at the same time grounded hope. It's a tall order, I know, but it is what's needed when we're wandering through the dark uncertainty of lost innocence. While existing friends and loved ones can be help, it can also be an opportunity to reach out in new ways. I mentioned earlier in the book, going to cardiac rehab in the aftermath of my heart attacks. It was me at 33 years old, and many people in their 70s, 80s, and even a couple in 90s, in a windowless basement of our local hospital, walking 2 or 3 miles an hour on a treadmill, hooked up to monitors with a rainbow of wires hanging out, talking about stents, catheterizations, oxygen levels, and pills with equal familiarity. And I can't forget the wonderful nurse with a thick Boston accent who spoke about cutting down on sugar and donuts. And I'm from Boston originally, so I can do that accent. Talk about theater of the absurd. And yet cardiac rehab was one place I felt safe. Safe to talk, safe to laugh, even safe to cry when I finally got to the treadmill up to 4 miles an hour, and once even broke out into a jog to a chorus of catcalls and whoops and cheers. One man, Frank, in his 90s, yelled, "Honey, you're going to break my heart all over again." Love you, Frank.
Well, that's a wonderful example of how amazing this book is in so many ways. It'll make you laugh, it'll make you cry, and it'll give you some aha moments, I think, in this book. Okay, so the next question is, you write about multiple losses of innocence, not just your heart attacks, but also about being advised to never carry a child or be a mother. How did this affect your life, relationships, and the healing process in general?
Thank you. Yes, good and difficult question. So let me just give you a very short background. So when I was 33 years old, as I said, I woke up one morning feeling like I had an elephant standing on my chest. And no one in our family has heart issues. And so I never once for a moment thought this was a heart attack. I was, quote unquote, the picture of health. And so I finally, after an hour, went to the emergency room parking lot, but convinced myself that it was just migraines. So I turned around and spent the next 2 days trying to ignore the elephant, only to wake up 72 hours later to a herd of elephants on my chest, and went immediately to the OR. As soon as they did an EKG, it was like something out of ER. Things were flying, people were running around, people were grabbing my arms. I mean, it was surreal. They learned they learned by a number of tests that I had a heart attack. But they didn't know why, because I didn't fit the profile for it. You know, typically it's plaque in your arteries, a blood clot, or a spasm. And they were convinced, because I was young and I didn't have any of the risk factors, that I was a cocaine addict. So 6 blood draws later, they said, okay, we believe you that you're. I was like, I love my glass of red wine, but really, I promise I was not doing cocaine. And anyway, that's a whole other story. But they would not. One of the things, so the type of heart attack I had is something called a spontaneous coronary arterial dissection, which is the other type of heart attack that nobody really talks about, because a lot of people historically have not known much about it. And it turns out it's the most common, quote unquote, relatively speaking, heart attack in women under 50. When they see it, they often see it in women who are pregnant or postpartum. It may be related to hormones, estrogen. We still don't know a lot about it. So though they couldn't tell me much in the hospital. Fortunately, I was in at Mass General in Boston at the time. They kept me. They didn't know much about this. They sent me home. Happened again 3 days later. Worse. I remember being on the table and them saying, we're losing her. Somebody jumping up on the table trying to help. Things did not go well in the family room, as I understand. And so the one thing that they could tell me was, we're pretty darn sure that if you got pregnant, the one thing we can tell you is that if you get pregnant, this will probably be life-changing, life-ending. And so they would not let me out of the hospital the second time to go home without making that abundantly clear. And so it was kind of another loss of innocence on top of the whole thing, because at 33 years old, and you're thinking like, okay, this is, maybe something that, I don't know that I identified extremely with being a mother. That wasn't the driving force in my life, but it was something that I thought I would do. And then when you don't have something, then you want it more. So it's had that. So that was another biggie. And so it just kind of deepened the whole process, and that much more. So.
All right. So this is your. Oh no, this is your question here. There's an excerpt about you in the closet thinking you were going to die. It's both funny and poignant. Could you read this? Is this the one that you're under the stairs or different?
No,
okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Apparently I'm in the closet. I'm I'm in a different coat. Yeah, okay. Under the stairs.
Could you read it to us and speak about why this is important to include?
Yeah, and I will get to the page with more efficiency this time.
And by the way, Mass General is going to have the book available to all their patients, which was a big deal, actually. That's a big hospital, and
they were
cool.
super great about that.
They're very proud of her. Yeah, I bet you are.
Okay. So this is coming from, I mentioned I have 7 pillars of resilience. This one is coming from pillar 6, self-mastery. We never want to seize control more than when we don't have it. I remember one day, a few weeks post-heart attack, standing in my bedroom closet, reaching for a sweater when the phone rang. It was in the middle of July in steamy, sweltering New England. And while everyone else was in tank tops and shorts, I had goosebumps under many layers. In addition to the triple blood thinning regimen that turned my blood into the consistency of water, which left me using nothing sharper than a butter knife, I was also on various blood pressure medications that left me fainting left and right and unable to drive the car for a while. When I quickly turned to answer the phone, everything in my periphery also began to rotate, and then the light dimmed and everything went dark. I awoke on the rug on my back with a small, wet sandpaper tongue having its way with my forehead. It was my cat. I managed to pull myself up into a sitting position, still groggy. As the room came into view, I realized I was sitting in a heap of knit. Apparently, the shelf that held my sweaters had toppled on me. Without thinking, I pushed onto my knees and tried to stand, with the same success as a toddler trying to take her first step. Boom! I plummeted again. 3 more times I pushed up and tumbled down. Finally, I was up, but teetering. My indignance at my precarious state, combined with an instinct to make the closet shelf submit, commandeered my good sense. When I bent over to pick up the shelf and heaved it up over my head, swaying as I did, a strange sensation rippled through my upper body. And then my cardiologist's voice yelled out, "Lift nothing over 10 pounds or above your shoulders." Down fell the shelf, scarring the poor cat. Down fell me again in an equal state of fear. I've done it, I thought. Another heart attack. This one worse. I've killed myself. I sat there on the floor watching the life I had just gotten back flash in front of my eyes again. And then rage engulfed me like a 13 alarm fire. All I remember is picking up a shoe on the floor next to me and whipping it against the floor again and again and again. Stupid. This whole thing is just so stupid. How can I ever do anything again? And then my cardiac geneticist's voice filled my ears. You should not do any strenuous activities, especially after sudden jarring movements. Well, that's it, I determined, looking at the abandoned shoe and bursting into tears. The nail in my coffin. I'm just going to sit here, wait, and die. And so I'm reading this delightful passage that puts me in such good light because it shows how you can feel, and that there's a sense of helplessness that lost innocence and meaningful adversity can throw at you. And it doesn't matter what the situation, in some capacity, uncertainty will come in. You realize you don't have control. There's really, life does not allow us control in many situations. But what you can do is take command of yourself in feeling, in thought, in action. And Pillar 6 is about self-mastery and how to do that, which I had to learn the hard way.
Okay. I kind of want to skip to the question I was going to surprise you with because I can tell you about it later. But I think everybody is going to be enthralled to buy your book. But what I want to ask is the last question that you suggested, which is, what's the most important message you want people to take away from your book, Holding On to Air?
I think it's the epigraph, which is, we can't recreate our life going backward. We can only reclaim our life moving forward. And also maybe, we hear a lot about the word survivor, and I survived this, I survived that. I don't think surviving is enough, because not all survivors are resilient. And there's many ways to survive, and not all of them serve us well. And I hope that this book helps people to more than survive.
And it will. So I'm going to open it up to questions, because I think that's a very healthy part of this whole exchange with authors and audience and readers. So does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask Michele?
Okay, I'm coming over
Okay,
with the
Erin.
mic.
Okay, Michele, it's just a fabulous book, and I hope all of you read it. I love the part where you talk about, like you just kind of touched on it just now, sort of like our cultural definitions of resilience, and you sort of go through and go deeper than those. So I wonder if you could maybe talk about that just a little bit, like what we think is resilient, like being strong, like kind of what you were just saying, or some of the other examples that you give in the book.
Sure. Thank you. And thank you for flying in. um, yeah, that it's actually a super good question. There's a lot of resilience definitions floating around out there. A lot of them have to do with bouncing back. You'll hear that along. Except if you look at it through the lens of lost innocence, what I'm saying is actually that the it's not, something has fundamentally changed in you when you have something that's meaningful adversity, and a loss of innocence. So the idea of just getting back to where you were isn't exactly possible, because where you were doesn't include what you've lost now. What you've lost. And so it almost, so I like to actually think of it not as bouncing back, but as recreating forward. And yeah, actually, maybe.
You know what, that was my question
Was
that I
that
was
your
going to
que-
ask.
were
That's
you-
a surprise question. I was going to say, you
To
offer
coordinate.
a framework in the book called HTC.
Yeah.
Honor the past, H, transform the present, T, and C is craft a new story for the future. Can you tell us how we can use this book to do this? That was my surprise question.
Okay. Well, so the one of the concepts in this book is about having a coherent sense of time, meaning being able to see yourself fully in the past, present, and the future. So often with trauma and meaningful adversity, people locate themselves in one or two of the times and not all of them. For example, if you lose something, you just kind of want to go back. I want to go back to the past, recreate it. I want what I used to have. And they ignore the present, they ignore the future, they just live in the past. There's also folks who the past is too hard for. So you're in the moment right now. All I'm doing is thinking about this moment. I can't think about the future. Certainly, I'm not going to recreate the past. But what ends up happening often is that you've heard the phrase "be here now." If anybody's heard it, it's almost there you go. Thank you, Francis. Yeah, they turn it into "me here now." So it's all about what I can do in the present to make myself feel better. It's like compensatory rewards. So you end up, it's like, I want that, I want that really expensive new car that I really can't afford, or I want that, something that's going to make you feel good, something that's going to fill that hole that's been torn inside you. And so that doesn't, and then other people will just forget everything and just focus on the future. And so one of the things that this book does is it really helps people to try to see themselves in the fullness of time. And so honoring the past is about not forgetting it, not overindulging it, not just honoring it, allowing it to be, finding kernels of truth, which how I like to think of them, not happy meaning messages or anything like that, but things that are meaningful, something that, like you said, some things are just sad. That's just a kernel of truth, and that's something that we can carry with us from the past. A message, a meaning, an insight to the present, and to help us build something for the future. At the same time, it helps you take when I say T, the T is transform the present. So how are you taking those kernels and planting them now to help you get grounded, to regain your stability, shall we say? So you can craft a new story for the future. And it doesn't mean you become somebody else, that it means that you literally are thinking about how this experience, you can create something new out of it. And so it really is a fullness of time
Great comment.
framework. Thank you.
Question right here.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi.
It's very nice to meet you. I was just on a panel on writing trauma at AWP, and we talked a lot about nonlinear challenges and paths to healing. And you mentioned earlier that the writing process itself was very therapeutic for you. So I was curious, in either your research or your own experience, do you think there's an inherent bias in writing and the path to healing through writing? And if so, what is that?
An inherent
Is there are there certain assumptions? Because a lot of people will say, well, yeah, write it down and that'll be very therapeutic. And that was your experience. But as you go into your research as a trauma researcher as well, do you find that always to be true?
Well, interesting. So I'm just going to put this down there. So my research for my PhD was in a subject related to this, lost innocence, but specifically in something called moral injury. And I won't go off on that unless you all would like to know something about that. But I created a therapy that's a writing therapy, actually, for moral injury and lost innocence specifically. It's not exactly in this book, but it builds off of that.
Is that the new workbook that you're going to get
yeah,
published?
yeah.
She's having another book published.
I have a guided journal coming out in September that's called Writing the Wrongs. Writing. So what I would say is that there are. I don't know that there's any one therapy that is good for everybody. I think it's all. I think my research and my own experience, and as I'm sitting here today, I think writing is a very, very therapeutic thing. But there are a number of different ways to write, and not all of them serve you well. So, for instance, when it comes to trauma, we know that in clinical populations, expressive writing, which is super fast writing, get it all out, talk about all the worst stuff and do it fast, and is not good. And that isn't helpful for people, which is one of the reasons why I created what I call embodied disclosure therapy, or EDT. And it's somatically based, so it works with the nervous system as you're writing, so that you're able to stay in your rational meaning-making brain, which is really important for trauma. Does that help? Okay.
Okay, we have a question over here.
Can I just say your Psychology Today article about the different forms of therapeutic writing was really, really helpful. Might want to give a shout out to that.
Love you, Matthew.
I shared that. It was a great article.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Michelle, I have a less philosophical, more practical question. You talk about the form of heart attack that you had. We have a friend, a very young man, very healthy man, who was horrified and surprised by his heart attack. And I think the mnemonic is SCAD. SCAD?
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I'd never heard of it before. And you say it's really prevalent.
No, it's not really prevalent. I'm sorry if it's the most common heart attack in women under 50, which is not very many. But yeah, I'm happy to. Thank you, David. He had a SCAD?
Yeah, and he's like 40-ish.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting, because like I said, it's typically they see it in usually in women, but it can be in men. Yeah, so the type of heart attack is a spontaneous coronary arterial dissection, aka SCAD. when I had it in 2008, they did not know really much about it. In fact, we're calling surgeons all over the globe while I was on the table trying to figure out what to do. I got involved after that in it was some online group where I happened to meet my dear friend Heather, who's sitting in the audience, who I hope I'm not, who is my SCAD sister, because she's had them too, and that's how we met. Um, and um, and a lot of us started talking online, and the Mayo Clinic kind of got wind of it and picked up and started doing research about it. So we know a bunch more than we know now, which is that it often happens to women who are under the age of 50, even though that's not always the case. um, and that it may have something to do with it definitely has something to do with the super sensitive vascular system, because it's what ends up happening is it's a tear in your coronary arteries. The blood pours in, that causes the clot, and that's what causes the heart attack. For men, as I understand it, and I'm not an expert in that area, I've heard of it when it's super exertion. Like I've heard of firefighters who have had it when they're trying to help people out of they have to carry a lot or way down. So, is there anything more specific that I can answer?
No, it was just surprising to me that
Yeah.
somebody without any sense you know,
And I think that's, yeah, David, I think that's it. I mean, I think one of which is why I was so surprised and why I never thought heart attack. I mean, I've heard it, mentioned, it's the healthy girl heart attack, so it comes on, quick.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
I'll answer it.
Hi, I'm sitting here because I have a 25-year-old son who has had something traumatic happen to him for the second time. And how could your book help me in helping to take care of him? Because I don't think your target audience would typically be a young male.
Thank you so much for your question. I think, well, it's funny. I've actually had, I do a lot of work with vets, and they have a lot of lost innocence, and a lot of them are young. So strangely, actually, even though you would think this is kind of a woman's book, it actually is. It's really written for people of any age at any time. So, and strangely, or I don't know if this helps or not, because it's a stereotype, but people associate heart attacks with men. So for some reason they're like, oh yeah, you had that, you had like a heart attack, and so, but I do think for you, if it's helpful, would be to understand maybe it could help you to understand maybe what he's going through, and give you some guidance around on how to help him get on a path.
Yeah, I totally agree that it would be completely suitable for you because there are universal truths in this book
Yeah.
that will touch every life that reads it and will give you strength in a lot of ways. It did me. Okay, so I'm going to ask one favor before we all leave. This lovely Drew, our photographer, we're trying to get this book into PW. So all the I've sent so many pictures in with me in them, but they never publish them. But the ones that they publish are when people hold up the book in a nice audience. So when Drew gets up here, I'm going to ask on the count of three for everybody to just hold up their books, and if anybody has any extras, to just pass them around a little bit, so that we can. But
Somebody can borrow mine.
okay.
Here, the parents need